This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain an action, comedy, and horror film called Wormwood, Road of the Dead. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. One day, Benny tells his fellow zombie apocalypse survivors the story of how he lost his brothers, Tony and Mulla, on a camping trip. The three brothers see a meteor shower during their first night in the woods, and when Benny wakes up the next day, he finds a trail of blood. He then discovers Mulla's body before seeing Tony, who's already turned into a zombie. Benny is unsure of what to do, so when Tony relentlessly chases him, he decides to blow his kneecap off before finally fleeing. Meanwhile, a mechanic named Barry recalls shooting his wife, Annie, and daughter, Megan, with a nail gun that morning. The night before that, Barry's sister, Brooke, does a photo shoot with her model, Charlie, and assistant, Cherry. Everything is fine at first, but then Charlie starts feeling pain in her body before coughing up blood. Charlie quickly turns into a zombie and attacks Brooke, who luckily manages to climb up the ceiling. Because of that, Charlie shifts her attention to Cherry and kills her with a bite to the neck. Still hungry, Charlie tries to attack Brooke again, but Brooke uses a hook to subdue her for just a while. Brooke then carefully gets down from the ceiling as Charlie dangles from a hook, only to be almost bitten by Cherry, who's also turned into a zombie. To defend herself, Brooke grabs a shovel and decapitates Cherry before attempting to leave. Unfortunately, another zombie stands outside, so Brooke is forced to remain inside her studio and calls Barry. Brooke is hysterical when Barry answers the phone, and she immediately tells her brother to leave the city after sharing with him her situation. Then, after their conversation, Megan informs her father that someone is in their kitchen. Barry then instructs Annie to call the cops before going to the kitchen, where he witnesses a zombie munching on raw meat. The zombie immediately attacks Barry as soon as he turns on the lights, so Annie helps him by stabbing the undead in the back. However, that doesn't really make much of a difference, so Annie hurriedly takes the axe and strikes the zombie on her husband's orders. Once again, she hits the zombie in the back, so Barry finishes it off by hitting it near the nape. Then, Barry wears a gas mask upon seeing the zombie exhaling gas and takes his tools with him, also instructing his masked wife and daughter to wait for him in the car. The family manages to get into their vehicle as more zombies pursue them, and they never stop driving until the sun comes up. Meanwhile, Brooke gets kidnapped by some soldiers wearing gas masks after they confirm through a blood test that she isn't a zombie. On the road, Megan removes her mask after getting tired, so Barry decides to stop the car. The girl then quickly turns into a zombie, and when Annie removes her mask too, she starts throwing up blood. Once Annie feels a bit better, the family decides to continue their journey. However, it isn't long before they stop again, for Annie tells her husband that she can feel that she's about to turn. Barry then hugs and kisses his wife, but once she turns into a zombie and starts emitting green gas from her mouth, he finally kills her with a nail gun. Barry kisses Annie for the last time before returning to their car, where he cries before killing Megan too. Now alone, Barry tries shooting himself in the head with the nail gun, but he unfortunately runs out of nails. On the other hand, Brooke wakes up in a mobile laboratory with other prisoners and zombies, and she's bound and gagged. A crazy scientist known as the Doctor enters the room. After he dances and takes some blood from a zombie, he eagerly injects it into Brooke's body. Meanwhile, another survivor, Chalker, finds Barry and feels relieved upon seeing another human. However, Barry doesn't share the same sentiment, for he wants to end his life. He grabs Chalker's gun and tries to kill himself, but the man manages to stop him just in time. The two then engage in a struggle, and they only stop when two zombies approach them. Once the men eliminate the undead, Barry demands Chalker to give up his gun. Sadly, Chalker refuses, so Barry begs him to shoot him instead. Still, Chalker refuses to comply and asks Barry to take the gun from him so he can do it himself, but once Barry reaches for his firearm, Chalker quickly knocks him out. Moments later, Barry wakes up on the back of Chalker's truck and breaks the vehicle's glass using a wooden cricket bat. Chalker then tries his best to calm him down, and once he does, Barry asks him to take him to Brooke's studio. However, their vehicle breaks down on the road and they decide to go into the woods upon hearing a gunshot. Unfortunately, Chalker gets his head blown off, and that's where Barry meets the shooter, Benny. Benny feels bad that he's mistakenly shot a human, but there isn't anything he can do about it anymore. Barry then uses Chalker's gun to shoot some approaching zombies, and Benny even lends him his own firearm. Then, once they're safe, Barry and Benny finally leave the woods together. Back in the laboratory, the doctor continues his experiment on the prisoners and zombies. He talks to Brooke and wonders why she's awake, but their conversation is cut short because of a prisoner's alarm. He then tortures the man, and once Brooke's alarm goes off too, the doctor injects her again with zombie blood. Meanwhile, Barry and Benny find a garage surrounded by zombies and ask the survivor inside, Kelly, if they can join. The man says that they can, and once the zombies move away from the garage and approach Barry and Benny, the other survivor, Frank, comes out with a mask and starts shooting the undead. Barry and Benny quickly make their way into the garage, and once they're inside, they immediately close it. However, a zombie woman manages to hold on to Barry, so Kelly comes to his rescue and shoots it in the head. Determined not to waste any time, Barry expresses his desire to use Frank and Kelly's hillocks outside the garage to find Brooke. However, when Frank assumes that he's driven all the way from the city and had engine trouble, Barry starts to get confused. Frank then shows them how different types of fuel won't burn, leaving them all wondering how that happened. But since no one can explain it, they just decide to drink some beer and eat. They each get a bottle of beer from a chest freezer, which contains a zombie named Neville that also exhales green gas. Of course, the men find that disgusting, so they immediately close the freezer and begin eating their meal. Then as they eat, Kelly lights a cigarette and throws the match at the zombie woman's bloodstain on the floor. Surprisingly, it bursts into flames, and due to Barry's experiment with Neville's breath, they realize that zombie blood and breath are flammable. Because of that, the men decide to make a zombie-fueled engine to make the truck work and prepare to leave. After wearing protective gear and arming themselves with different kinds of weapons, the men throw several pieces of raw meat outside to distract the zombies. They then immediately head for the truck and tow it back to the garage, all the while making sure to keep their distance from the flesh eaters. Unfortunately, Kelly gets bitten after kicking a zombie in a complicated manner, and although his companions manage to help him, he still loses his nose. Then it only takes Kelly a few seconds to turn into a zombie, and no matter how much Frank protests, Benny quickly hits him and uses him as their fuel source. Frank can only watch what's happening to Kelly, but he has no other choice but to help Barry and Benny upgrade their truck. Once they're done, Frank shows them the gas-powered harpoon he's made and demonstrates how it works before they finally leave. Back at the lab, Brooke discovers that she can use telepathy to control the zombies. It might be because of the doctor's experiments, but Brooke doesn't even think about it anymore and uses her powers to free herself. Unfortunately, her plan is interrupted by two masked soldiers who arrive with more zombies. With her time running out, Brooke uses telepathy to make one zombie knee a soldier in the balls. Then, she makes it pick up a scalpel, stab itself in the stomach, before hitting it to hide the blade inside its body. The soldier that got injured repeatedly kicks the zombie until the doctor arrives and orders them to leave. However, once they do, Brooke concentrates even harder in using her powers. Concurrently, Barry, Benny, and Frank encounter more zombies in the woods and decide to kill them for fuel. However, once they're back on the road, Benny asks Barry to stop over so he can relieve himself. With no other choice, Barry pulls over and lets Benny out, but as he minds his own business, a zombie buried in the dirt comes out and tries to attack Benny. Luckily, Frank quickly shoots it and gives Benny time to return inside the vehicle. But unfortunately, their truck won't start, and when Barry and Benny check what's happening, they realize that the zombies don't breathe flammable gas at night. Frank also assumes that the zombies use their gas at night, making them move faster. With no other way to make their truck work, the men return inside the vehicle just in time before more zombies attack them. As the night deepens, Benny, Frank, and Barry decide to drink as they talk about how they never turned into zombies like the others. Frank then starts talking about Wormwood, which according to the Bible, was the star that fell to the earth when the third angel blew his trumpet and brought a disease that killed many people. Frank says that he's sure that the meteor shower the other night has something to do with the increasing number of the undead, adding that God is currently testing them. Then, before he sleeps, Frank asks Barry and Benny to wake him up if the zombies ever get inside the truck. Moments later, Barry wakes up from a nightmare about his family and shoots one zombie. Because of that, he accidentally sets another zombie on fire, and it causes their truck to burn too. The men need to move fast before the fire reaches their compressor, so Barry comes out of the vehicle to put the fire out. Meanwhile, Benny and Frank shoot the other zombies to keep them from killing Barry. Unfortunately, the zombies are too fast, and the more that Barry shoots them, the more the others become aggressive. Frank is also bitten when he's about to lock the truck's roof, and as he screams in pain, he orders Benny to take the bottles of beer from their medical box. Frank then drinks and makes his companions drink too, and once they do, he instructs Barry to shoot him before he kills them. The next day, Barry and Benny wake up with more zombies waiting for them, but on the bright side, they finally manage to start the engine and get out of there. They then dump Kelly and Frank on the side of the road, and Benny says a short prayer. Barry then shoots Kelly. After that, Barry and Benny continue the search for Brooke. Moments later, they encounter some soldiers who claim that something in the air changes people, and that anyone with A negative blood type, like Barry and Benny, are unaffected. They then ask Barry and Benny where they're headed, and after learning that they're on their way to Brooke's studio in Bula Bula, they say that they've just returned from that place and add that it's crawling with zombies. To gain Barry and Benny's trust, the soldier driving the truck informs them that their captain called them from his roving unit and said that he's just picked up more survivors with A-negative blood types. Then, he asks for the name of Barry's sister, and after Barry tells him, he goes back inside the truck and radios the captain. It isn't long before he informs Barry that they have Brooke, but when Barry insists on talking to the man in charge, the soldier tells him to relax and follow him so he can take him to his sister. With no other choice, Barry follows the soldiers and points out to Benny that he doesn't trust those men. Meanwhile, Brooke makes a zombie that she's controlled earlier take the scalpel out of its body and use it to free itself. Then she commands it to attack the doctor, but the zombie fails to get his gun and wakes him up instead. Terrified, the doctor frantically reaches for his firearm and repeatedly shoots the zombie until it's no longer moving. After that, Brooke's alarm goes off, leaving her horrified that the doctor will do another experiment on her. Luckily, she manages to use telepathy and makes another zombie unplug the tool the doctor is about to use on her. Then, Brooke uses the zombie on the gurney to push itself towards the doctor and bites his fingers. To prevent the infection from spreading, the doctor uses a circular saw to cut off his hand and plans to hurt Brooke, blaming her for what's happened to him. Fortunately, he quickly turns into a zombie, and Brooke uses him to free herself and make him hand over his gun so she can shoot him in the head. Finally, Brooke removes the tubes that the doctor has placed inside her mouth and cuts the cable ties binding her feet before opening the door. To her surprise, Brooke sees Barry in a truck following the mobile laboratory. On the other hand, Barry realizes that the soldiers were lying and that Brooke was with them all along. He then orders his sister to jump on their truck, and as more soldiers in another vehicle pursue them, they use more gas from their zombie to increase their speed and escape. Unfortunately, their zombie gets shot, and their truck won't work without it. Benny explains to Brooke that their vehicle runs on zombies, so Brooke once again uses telepathy to call a zombie and commands it to get on the back of the truck. Just when they think that their problem is over, the soldiers arrive and shoot Benny in the stomach. Barry then quickly takes Benny to the truck and tells Brooke they need to put the blue mask on the zombie before they can go, so Brooke controls the flesh eater and makes it wear the mask Barry's referring to. Benny thinks about his dead brothers as he deals with his painful gunshot wound. Brooke tries to comfort him, and she soon learns that Annie and Megan are already dead. They then decide to pull off the road since Benny's condition is worsening, and once they're in the woods, Benny asks Barry to leave him there since he's already dying. However, Barry refuses even after seeing Benny's wound, realizing that he will die. Meanwhile, Brooke feels that something is happening to her body as she throws up. Barry then hugs Brooke and admits to killing his wife and daughter, telling her that he isn't sure that he can kill her if she turns into a zombie. Because of that, Brooke asks for Barry's gun and holds his hand as she's about to shoot herself, but she's interrupted by the soldiers who've just arrived. Brooke quickly shoots one of them, but unfortunately, Barry and Benny get captured. Moments later, the soldiers wake up an unconscious Barry and order him to summon Brooke, but when Barry makes it clear that he won't comply, they shoot him with rubber bullets and warn him that they'll hurt him if he doesn't obey. Still, Barry refuses, so one of the soldiers mercilessly pulls out his fingernail using a pair of pliers. Meanwhile, Brooke controls several zombies to attack the soldiers, leaving them scared and wondering at the same time how the undead are moving so fast during the daytime. The captain ignores his subordinates and orders them to pull out another one of Barry's nails, but when Brooke hears that, she decides to finally come out of hiding. She is then ordered to cuff herself and is dragged back to the truck, where the soldiers handcuff her to the vehicle. Brooke begins throwing up after learning that the soldiers plan to take off her head and bring it to their commanding officer, and as one of the soldiers retrieves a sword in an icebox, Barry asks Benny for his matches so he can blow up their compressor. Barry would rather die than give up, but Benny suggests letting the zombie in their truck bite him, so Brooke can control him later once he turns into a flesh eater. Brooke then concentrates on calling more zombies, as the soldiers prepare to decapitate her. As the soldiers take Brooke, Benny distracts Barry by throwing the matches under the truck, before letting their zombie bite him. Benny then becomes a zombie, and Brooke uses him to get his number 7 killer boomerang under the truck and chop off his cuffed hand before finding a gun to shoot the soldiers. Unfortunately, the captain quickly shoots him in the head, and when Brooke threatens to attack him using her zombie horde, he shoots her too. Barry can only watch and scream as the zombies and Brooke fall to the ground simultaneously, so he picks up Benny's boomerang and throws it at the captain. Pissed, the captain finally reveals his face as Barry taunts him for not having an A-negative blood type, telling him that it's only a matter of time before he dies. However, the captain tells Barry that what they're doing is not about him or his sister, but about the survival of the human race. He then hits Barry when he refuses to listen to him, and since the captain is enraged that all of his men are dead, he gives Barry the key to his handcuffs so he can free himself and fight him. The men engage in a fight, and as a soldier, the captain easily beats Barry. He also shoots Barry when he grabs his private parts, and the captain continues hitting him. Then he shoots the zombie in the truck when it tries to bite him, causing its blood to splatter on his face. Upon seeing that, Barry grabs the matches under the truck and eagerly sets the captain on fire. However, when Barry is about to shoot him, Brooke gets up and removes the bullet from her chest, and her zombies rise too. Then, without warning, Brooke orders her zombies to feast on the captain's flesh. Later on, Barry and Brooke encounter the soldiers driving the mobile laboratory on the road. Barry then demands to see what's in their truck, but when the soldiers refuse, Brooke delightedly uses her zombie horde to kill them.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.